Self-elevation rarely begins with a direct statement like, I am better than you. In real life, it almost always sounds softer, more cultured, and more socially safe. A person says, I usually choose decent options. I only buy from official places. I've been in this field for a long time. Formally, he has insulted no one, but an invisible hierarchy has already appeared in the air. If he chooses decent options, then there must also be indecent ones, and that means someone in the room is automatically placed lower. This form of behavior is as old as human markets, armies, and palaces. In ancient Rome, patricians demonstrated status not only through wealth, but also through the way they spoke about their own taste. During the Renaissance, Italian aristocrats discussed fabrics, books, and weapons as if the very choice of an object revealed the moral quality of a person. Even then, consumption was turning into rhetoric. Not simply, what did you buy, but what kind of person are you since you chose this? That is why ethos, the image of oneself, has always been a central element of persuasion. Aristotle wrote that people believe not only arguments, but also the image of the speaker himself. Over time, humanity learned to build this image almost invisibly, not through direct domination, but through atmosphere, through the feeling. This person knows something that others do not. Today, this is especially visible on the internet. A person posts a photo of a cup of coffee from the right place, writes about quality people, about their circle, about a normal level. And although formally the topic is coffee, a restaurant, or a phone, in reality there is a constant struggle for symbolic status. Social networks have turned ethos into a daily theater of microsignals. Hack Chapter 2: How Status Learned to Hide. Interestingly, in ancient societies, self-elevation was much more direct. Kings wore gold, generals wore scars and armor, and priests wore special clothing. Power was visible, but the modern world has made open boasting socially dangerous. A person who directly says, I am above everyone else, risks rejection. So rhetoric began to evolve. A new form of status appeared: hidden status. It works through undertones, through hints, through I'm just sharing my experience. This is how the humble brag emerged: modest boasting. A person says, I'm tired of choosing between projects. And formally he is complaining, but in reality he is demonstrating demand. He says, I had to search for a decent version for a long time. And it seems as if he is talking about a purchase, although in reality, he is showing his selectiveness. This intensified especially after the rise of mass consumption in the 20th century. After World War II, when America entered the age of advertising, corporations understood. People are not sold products, they are sold identity. A car became not just a machine, but a symbol of character. Cigarettes became an image of independence. Watches became a sign of class. This is how ethos finally merged with marketing. Companies like Apple built a huge part of their brand precisely on this feeling. Their advertising rarely says, our phone is more powerful. It says, people like us are different from the others. And millions of people begin to use a purchase as a rhetorical statement about themselves. Chapter 3: Not Like the Others. But the real turning point begins when contrast appears. Self-elevation becomes especially strong when opposition emerges. Not simply, I am good, but I am not like them. This is one of humanity's oldest social mechanisms. Tribes built identity through an enemy, religions through heretics, empires through barbarians. Even in medieval Europe, cities formed their pride by contrasting themselves with their neighbors. Florence looked at Venice, Venice looked at Genoa, and each side considered itself more civilized. Modern people do the same thing, only more softly. I don't buy like people do on marketplaces. I don't buy that trash. I stopped watching that kind of content long ago. There is almost always a hidden lowering of the alternative here. Even if no one is named directly, this is especially visible in technological circles. Developers contrast real engineers with coders from courses. Traders contrast smart money with the crowd. People begin to build identity through distance from the wrong ones. And the more elite the group seems, the stronger the rhetorical effect. Chapter 4: Markets of Status. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Europe went through a strange revolution. People began to buy things en masse not because they needed them, but because those things signaled position. Historians call this the birth of consumer society. In France, at the court of Louis XIV, Aristocrats literally competed in symbols of status: who stood closer to the king, who wore more expensive fabric, who received the right to be present at the monarch's morning dressing ritual. Even access to space became a rhetorical signal. Over time, this flowed into the modern lifestyle. Today, a person can use not only clothing for self-elevation, but also food, music, psychology, travel, books, and even moral positions. This is how virtue signaling appears, the demonstration of one's own rightness. Not simply, I eat this, but I am a conscious person. Not simply, I read books, but I belong to the intellectual class. The internet accelerated this process to the point of madness. Now a person constantly publishes small fragments of their identity, and every fragment becomes part of an endless ethos constructor. Chapter 5: Borrowing Strength. One of the oldest ways to strengthen one's own ethos was to attach oneself to a powerful source. In ancient times, people wore the coats of arms of their clans. Warriors showed under whose banner they served. Students of philosophical schools called themselves followers of famous teachers. This is how association works. A person elevates himself through a connection with authority. I buy from an official supplier. I studied under. I use the same thing professionals use. Sometimes this is rational, but often it is pure rhetoric. This became especially interesting in the 20th century with the emergence of celebrities in advertising. When Michael Jordan became the face of Nike, people were not simply being sold sneakers. They were being sold a symbolic connection with strength, discipline, and success. Association became a billion-dollar industry. Today, this has penetrated even everyday speech. People refer to brands, countries, universities, and companies as sources of their own legitimacy. Sometimes a person literally builds self-esteem through a list of associations. Chapter 6: The War for Criteria. But one of the most powerful functions of ethos is control of the frame, not to win within someone else's rules, but to change the rules of evaluation themselves. In political history, this was used constantly. During the Cold War, the United States and the USSR fought not only with weapons, but also with criteria of success. One side spoke about freedom, the other about social justice. The winner was not the one who answered the other side's question, but the one who imposed their own coordinate system. In everyday communication, this looks almost invisible. The conversation was about the taste of a product, but the person shifts it to the topic of where did you buy it? The conversation was about features, but he shifts it to normal people don't do that. The metric has changed. This is why many arguments cannot be won with facts, because the argument is not about facts, but about evaluation criteria. Whoever controls the frame controls the social height within the conversation. Chapter 7: The Age of Forums and Toxic Elitism. When the internet became mass market, ethos experienced a second birth. Forums of the early 2000s were real arenas of rhetorical status. People competed through knowledge, cynicism, technical details, and contempt for newbies. On IT forums, there was an almost ritual form of self-elevation. A person could write, "Well, that's basic stuff," and with one phrase, simultaneously demonstrate his own competence and lower the opponent. In trader communities, phrases appeared like, "The crowd dumped everything again." This formed the identity of those who understand the market. Interestingly, this rhetoric is very similar to the closed clubs of the 19th century. Back then, elites also used language as a filter. Whoever knew the right words was one of us. Whoever did not was an outsider. The modern digital world has only accelerated this mechanism. Now status is built not over years, but in seconds. One tweet, one comment, one meme can elevate or destroy a person's social image. Chapter 8: Self-Elevation Through Rationality. One of the most powerful forms of modern ethos has become positioning oneself as a rational person. People increasingly demonstrate not wealth, but awareness, critical thinking, and analytical ability. Interestingly, this intensified especially after the financial crises of the early 21st century. After the global financial crisis of 2008, society began to value more highly the image of a person who understands the system. This is how analyst bloggers, financial commentators, and intellectual influencers appeared. But hidden contrast works here too. When a person says, "I try to think rationally," the implication is often, unlike the emotional masses. Rationality becomes a new status marker. This is especially visible in communities around investing, AI, and technology. People use complex terms not only for explanation, but also as signals of belonging to the intellectual elite. Chapter 9. When ethos becomes a weapon. History knows many cases where self-elevation turned into an instrument of power. In totalitarian regimes, leaders built an almost mythological image of their own exceptional nature. They did not simply govern, they created a sacred ethos. In the 20th century, political technologists began studying this systematically. Propaganda understood that it is easier for a person to believe someone who looks confident, high status, and morally right. That is why public image began to be designed almost like an engineering system. Even the corporate world adopted these mechanics. CEOs of major companies create carefully constructed images: visionary, rebel, genius, disciplined operator. Sometimes this is reality, sometimes it is theatrical construction. And the stronger the media environment becomes, the more important perception management becomes. Because in the information age, people compete not only with resources, but also with images. Chapter 10. Why another person's ethos hooks us. The human brain is evolutionarily sensitive to status. For ancient humans, position within the group literally affected survival. Whoever was higher received resources, allies, and protection. That is why even today people instantly read microsignals of superiority. Intonation, confidence, phrasing, choice of words. We may rationally argue with the person, but emotionally, we still feel the pressure of their ethos. Social networks have made this a constant background of life. Now a person compares himself daily with thousands of other people's images, and many unconsciously begin to respond in the same way, by building their own symbolic pedestal. This creates an endless rhetorical race, not only for attention, but also for the feeling of height. Chapter 11. Defensive techniques. But the most interesting thing is that counter techniques exist against ethos. One of the most effective is the normalization of the alternative. If a person tries to create a sense of exceptionalism, you show that his case is ordinary. When someone says, "I only buy official," the response does not have to be aggressive. It is enough to softly weaken the link between official and ideal. Official stores also make mistakes. This is not a conflict. It is the destruction of a monopoly on status. Another technique is frame deconstruction. If a person shifts the conversation from product quality to the status of the buyer, you can return the discussion back to the criteria. Do not argue about personality. Return the conversation to the subject. That is why strong negotiators rarely respond to hidden domination with direct aggression. They change the architecture of the conversation itself. Chapter 12. The New Aristocracy of the Internet. In the 21st century, a new digital aristocracy has emerged. Not hereditary, but algorithmic. People compete for symbolic capital: followers, reputation, perceived expertise. Bloggers, entrepreneurs, traders, programmers, influencers, all of them constantly project ethos. Some do it through intelligence, some through lifestyle, some through cold rationality, some through moral superiority. The irony is that many do not even notice how they are participating in this game. A person thinks he is simply talking about himself, but at the same time, he is building a vertical hierarchy, creating distance, forming a sense of level. Ethos never disappeared. It only changed form. From Roman togas and royal courts to YouTube, Threads, and TikTok. And as long as people exist, there will be a desire to look a little higher, a little smarter, a little more correct than those around them.